Hi, I'm Amy McCoy, host of Let's Talk About It, where we talk about everything from real estate to business to politics. We're going to be able to have conversations with many professionals about day-to-day life and what we can expect from our political leaders. Not only that, but we're going to explore what you should be doing within your finances and how you can protect your civil rights in real estate. Join the conversation and let's talk about it. Greetings, everyone. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today as we get to explore what NAR is offering for not only our agents, but our community. And I have invited the gracious Jessica Lautz from NAR to be a part of our today's discussion. So welcome, Jessica. Thank you for being a part of us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. I'm super psyched to be chatting with you today.
Yay! So for our second show, this is amazing because you're always on TV. I love that. Like every time I get to this fangirl moments whenever I see that you're on there, because the way that are able to articulate reports and things like that, like me, I sit there and I read those reports and none of these reports are sexy at all. Like, you know what I mean? And so, but to be able to articulate it for people to understand the challenges that we see in America. So I am just so thankful that you have graced us with your time and able to provide some insight of your talents here. So why don't you go ahead and tell us what you do at NAR?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and you're absolutely right. I think that if you're proofing a report, it is really good if you have insomnia and you can't sleep. Picking up a 150-page report is a great idea. But I will tell you, I try and make data fun. So I work here at NAR in the research group. I'm here in the DC office today. It's kind of gloomy, actually. And what we do is we try and break down data so that consumers can use it, so that realtors can use it, so that the media understands it and will put it out there. So that's what we're doing here. And some of it is consumer data, some of it's member data, some of it's just looking at the economy overall and what's going on.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And so you're right. It really takes time to really regurgitate, one, digest, but then to regurgitate the information so that, like you said, from consumers, not just from the average agent, to be able to communicate it to their, local municipalities or things like that when they're seeing challenges in their community, but most importantly, so that consumers are able to understand it themselves. I love when I see you on CNN, or I think you've been on Bloomberg. I mean, just so many different, media sites that really kind of expand to different demographics. So it doesn't matter which level that someone's education is on, they're hearing the same information. And you're right, you make sure that it's engaging enough. I remember one report, and we were talking about dogs. I love it.
Because I'm a huge driver. People love their pets.
I love my fur baby Tabitha. So yeah, she is spoiled rotten. But as a single Black woman, having my fur baby, finding a home and one that was going to be conducive to my personal needs, you actually shed a lot of light to that. So that just kind of gives an idea of the type of reports. Some may be kind of trivial, some are really in depth. Mm-hmm. Tell us about some recent reports that you've had that just released.
So hot off the presses, I would say since our annual or mid-year conference in May, we had our fly-in where Amy, you were there as well. And it was so great seeing you in person. And people went to the Hill and they wanted to be charged with data. And of course, undersupply and underbuilding is really important right now that we talk about the supply crisis and the inventory crisis. But of course, we're taking a pulse on the economy as well. We know that there's rising rates and that's impacting everyone, but it's impacting minority buyers more because we know that traditionally they have lower incomes, harder time to save. And so when you think about inflation and hitting the pocketbook, all of those things are going to hit the consumer. So we have a lot of recent reports that we've done looking at the racial gap in homeownership and ways that we can address that as well. So that was a lot that I just threw out there of data that we put out.
It's necessary. I mean, personally, in the last 60 days, I personally have lost more than 3 million in volume between my listings, between buyers that I had been working with probably for several months to finally get them under contract. And then the rate hike went up, and it was like, oh, I'm now priced out. So now I have to cancel the contract. And, as an entrepreneur, nobody reimburses me for that time, right?
Right.
And so that makes a significant difference for entrepreneurs like myself that has staff. And so, it's things that are happening outside of the day-to-day life of a realtor that I don't think a lot of people truly understand. And so tell us, why that gap is actually probably there. I mean, we're doing a lot. Right now, you would think that you see a lot of building happening,
Mhm.
but what does that really look like?
Yeah. So big sigh on that one. So we've been under building for a very significant period of time, well over a decade. We do not have enough rental units, and we don't actually have enough units to purchase. So whether that's a single family home or a condo, inventory is in short supply. And there's a lot of reasons why. We know that housing starts. So we're building more. The intention is there in the last year to actually build more. But when it comes to a home actually complete, that's where the hitch is in the last year. So it used to take about 6 to 9 months to go from a housing start to a housing complete. But I think even a 2-year-old today probably knows about the supply crisis because they're missing their favorite toy. And that's hitting housing too. And then if we think about the labor shortage to actually have people come to work and build a home, that's in short supply as well. So
Yeah,
all
they
of this
haven't
stuff
they
has
haven't
to be
really
great.
increased the pay.
No, well, it's that, yeah, and we're, there's the big push to go to college, and that's a wonderful thing. Obviously, I love education. I have my doctorate myself, always wanting to be a lifelong learner. But for some, it might make a lot of sense to have a six-figure salary and be a master electrician or a plumber because we need those jobs right now.
Absolutely. I remember coming through high school, and it was 20 plus years ago, and it was this major push that it had to be, you got to go to college. You got to go to college. And I could care less about going to college. I ended up going,
Mhm.
but I didn't stay long. I
Right.
recognized I was right. I hate sitting here reading books and and trying to
Mhm.
take tests, but that was because I had my own educational challenges. However, I now know as a 40-plus-year-old woman, I should have finished because now I didn't understand back then how statistics really was relatable. I really didn't know what I was going to be doing in algebra. I just knew it was very boring at that point. But now, as someone who sits and reads these reports, I've found that it is critical for how I do my business. Now, I'm not the average realtor. Not everybody's out here advocating private property rights the
Mhm.
same way that I may, because
Mhm.
we all have our own journeys. But I
Absolutely.
recognize now how critical that is. And so again, I am just so encouraged by people like yourself that have taken that time to be able to say, this is how you read this data. And here is a way that you can be able to go talk to your municipality leaders,
Mhm.
your municipal leaders, your congressional leaders, and have them being able to see it. Because what I do recognize when I go on these Hill visits or even to my state house locally is that not everybody even understands what the protected classes are of fair housing.
Mhm.
So when
Mhm.
you take that into equation that, well, how are you deciding how dollars are distributed or where the need is to build, or even from placing certain exclusionary zoning in place? How can you effectively, as a leader, really make sure that we are meeting the demands of what the consumers are going to need? So now we
Mhm.
realize, and how much of that shortfall has it really equated dollar wise?
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so important too, is to talk to the local communities because every local community has such varying issues. So even if we think about whether we should look at building repurposing, that's a way that we could have more residential units. Well, some communities do have vacant malls. Our community does here in suburban DC, at least. And those vacant malls are being converted into residential units. That's a huge opportunity. Some of the residential areas may have a vacant hotel or motel. So that could be pretty cool to have a residential actual unit that you could live in full time there. I know the community that I grew up in Washington State, there was a vacant school. And they actually made that into a retirement community because that was an opportunity that they saw for that beautiful building that wasn't being used in the middle of town. So there are ways that we can address the housing shortage, but every community is different. And I think it's really breaking it down and showing community leaders, we can do this. We just have to make the steps to make this happen.
Wow. Well, and that's so true, because even here where I'm at in Atlanta, Georgia, in the complex I'm at, that's always being filmed with Marvel movies and things like that. They're in a transition right now, taking down one of the commercial buildings. All the people that were in that high rise are now moving into my building here. And they're converting that to housing. So which is really good. We're hoping it comes online soon. They've been working on it for an extensive period of time, but we recognize that these type of innovative ideas are able to actually help our housing market, not just from a residential, but it's even helping on the commercial side of things, right? Because now you're taking away those vacant buildings that sometimes can create blights in communities, right? How are you seeing this type of transition happening across the United States?
Yeah, so that's one of the cool things that our economists dug into in the last year is actually looking at looking at case studies in local communities and creating reports around it so that you can take these and it could be an advocacy tool, but maybe you're actually working with a builder. Maybe you start into that trade. And we actually do see that about 10% of our members, realtor members, are actually into that. And that's ways that they're investing in their community. So maybe it's that vacant hotel motel, maybe it's the office space, maybe it's that residential mall, but we have reports on all of that. So if you want to dig in and look at the case studies on that, we can show you ways to do it.
So just even talking from a consumer standpoint, right? From a consumer mindset, where could they go for that? If they're not, say they don't have a realtor member right away, where can they see these things at?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of our research is posted on NAR.realtor. It's in the research and statistics section of the website. It's all consumer friendly too. So we try and make our reports pretty to look at. Hopefully it's not super boring, but absolutely do dig into those reports because they're fun.
Yes, I agree. And the beautiful thing about it is NAR has been expanding the type of grants that they've been offering. So, for us as realtors, and there's a 1.6 million, I think we're almost at now. So that is huge across the whole globe, because we're not just only in the United States. We have certain territories that we're in, and we're reaching more of a global scale. But one of the beautiful things that I love is that NAR has been intentional with offering grants. So that way people like yourself are able to come in to be able to give these type of housing reports. Our economists, our diversity department, or even if somebody's looking for a placement grant, right? There's ways that we can incorporate from the data that you're able to bring forth. We're able to incorporate that it's outside of just the typical, right? If we beautify a community, what kind of income we could potentially expect from that being an economic generator, right? From a touristic side of things, so it just allows a lot of innovative opportunities. And I believe that stemmed from a lot of the reports that you take the time to put together. And again, thank you, Matt. Thank you so much for that.
The research team is amazing, truly. They are a great group of individuals here. But absolutely, those grants, I think they fly under the radar sometimes, but they are available. So absolutely, that is another resource.
How many people do you have on your team?
So in the research team, it's a staff of 15 here. So, and they're specialists in business insights and surveys and focus groups, individual interviews, just pure economics, data scientists. So yeah, they're brilliant and they're all just crunching out data every day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So when we talk about from your role, because in reading, I'm like, okay, demographics, behavioral insights and research. What really is behavioral insights?
So just looking at behavior and how that is different today than it used to be in the past. So even if we look at changing demographics and how that's going to shift what people want in a home. So there's a drop in birth rates, there's a drop in marriage rates. women are empowering themselves to go buy a house on their own. And we see, yes, a rising share of single women buying homes with their dogs in hand. My little sister is a stat from last year doing the same thing. I think it's incredible to watch these changes, but we have to understand why they're happening, and to understand that behavior. It's incredibly important when we think about the economy overall, because demographics is a huge driver of that.
Yes. And seeing the difference from one of your recent ones, report, I started looking back at, because when I got up this morning, I was like, yes, I see more reports released, right? And from we've seen a huge drop, right? From an affordability standpoint to what this shortage of inventory. Can you kind of give our viewers what that kind of looks like right now?
Yeah, it's tough. It's absolutely tough for buyers today, because it's changing. Just the jump in mortgage rates coupled with the continual rise in home prices, it's changing what people can afford. So maybe that means a different neighborhood. Maybe that means a smaller home, just to get you into that rise in home equity over time. But it does mean sacrifices for buyers. So for someone who's buying a $300,000 home, which is actually under the median today, but that is on the affordable price point. So a first time home buyer could easily probably fit that price point. That's typically where that first time home buyer would come into. It had meant a payment of $1,300 a month for a mortgage payment. Now it means $1,800. That is tough. It's absolutely tough to pull that extra $500 together, because that means cuts other areas. And we know that there's a rise in groceries, there's a rise in rent. So all of these things is just making it harder to save for a down payment, because we see that rise in costs. Then that monthly payment too, just seeing that rise, that's very, very hard for a consumer out there today. So first time home buyers, I feel for you. I absolutely do, because you have to really stretch and save and make compromises along the way there.
Oh, absolutely. And what we see from demographics wise, as a Black woman, as a Black member of the National Association of Realtors, and that's what NAR means, folks. Sorry, I forgot, failed to say that at the beginning. But for the National Association of Realtors, you do a lot with reports of what we have with even in our own members. Which I love. When I see these surveys come out, I look forward to seeing the results of what these are. Who's taken the time to fill out the questions, because it comes to who their experiences in their areas. Do you get a lot of feedback from, like, I don't know if everybody's as excited when like I am when I see them, but do you get a lot of responses? How long does that time take for everyone to send their data in?
Oh, gosh, that's a really good question. So, for our longest survey that we do, it's an annual basis, and it's called the Profile of Home Buyers and Sellers. And that's looking at recent consumers who purchased a home in the last year. We've been doing it since 1981. So 41 years this year, which is incredible. Yeah, it's crazy to
That's my
know.
birth year, y'all. Yay.
It's also my birth year, 1981. Yes.
The best year. Just throwing that out there. That's why we matched today, everybody.
Absolutely. I love the green. We were feeling it.
We were.
So that survey takes almost 6 months, honestly, to put together. From like starting it right now, today, we have to send it off to the vendor to program it and mail it out to 200,000 consumers to get the data back and to actually crunch it and put it in the report and release it. But then we have flash surveys. So say we need to know an answer to something really quickly, and we need Amy's opinion and anyone else's opinion as quickly as we can get it. We can do it. We can do it pretty fast, and we can have the results by next week. If we really have to, though, we might be shedding a few tears in the process. So it is possible to have a quick survey, but some of them do take quite a bit of time.
Right. And I believe that. In seeing from the demographics, even within our own association, and I know we haven't done, because we've exchanged emails previously, that we'll probably get to a member profile by next year, because it was getting dismal. The reality of it is, I think the last one we had where African Americans only made up 6% of our organization. And then what translates that on those members that actually serve, even from a committee standpoint, we have to think about our full scale of diversity in the way that we think. And so much has happened just even in the last 2.5 years, right? So I have seen a growth in that, and more members intentionally want to engage to make an impact just on our industry. And so I'm looking forward to what that next profile is going to look like. And I mean, it's important for our consumers to understand what those challenges are based on our demographics, right? I think in one of those, it came into how much we, even as Black Americans, make even within our profession. And as we talk about the wealth gap based on homeowners and their home ownership rates, what that expect, do you might know that right off the top of your head?
So it is incredibly important, and yes. So we do we do see that for African American Black members in real estate, they are making substantially less as a gross income than we do see for their white counterparts. I will say there's a couple reasons behind that. We know that we have a growing share of minority membership, and that's fantastic. And so that's not controlling for that. So if you're a few years new in the industry, and if you're listening in, it's hard right now because you've expected or you've seen this really, really hot market, and now the market's completely different. But traditionally, it's very hard for a new member to join and to get their feet under them, to find their niche, to find their client base. So that is one of the reasons why we do see that differential. But yeah, the career choices report, check out that data because it is eye-opening for sure.
Definitely eye-opening. Yeah. But more importantly, what this data should do, as I know it does for me, is it empowers me to want to make an even better difference and bigger impact, with not just in my local community, but it engages me on a state level, and it prepares me from those Hill visits when we go see our congressional leaders. I am so thankful that you have made this time for me today. I really don't know how to say it bigger than that, other than because the joy that's in my heart, because I know how much time it takes, and how tough sometimes it is even to deliver this type of, like I said, sometimes it is very hard information to have to share. And so what is your hope and desire for America in terms of our housing stock? Do we see an increase coming soon? Do we see the big R coming? I mean, you happen to be there on the ground with other economists and researchers in the room. Is there anything you might be able to share with us?
Yeah, totally. And yeah, Lawrence Yun, our chief economist, Dr. Lawrence Yun, he's right across the wall right here. So I can just listen into what he's saying on a daily basis. I will say that our current forecast doesn't have a recession. So a recession is technically 2 quarters of negative GDP growth. We've already had one. So we're already halfway there if you're gonna have a standard there. It's possible that we hit a recession, and it's possible that does happen. I will say it would be a very unique recession. And this is what our chief economist is repeatedly saying, because we know that for every employee who's looking for a job right now, there's 2 job openings. It's very crazy to see that. So we could have workplaces limited that do cut jobs, but it would not be similar to past recessions where there have been big job cuts. That's not our forecast, and it's not our expectation. I will say the big question right now too is, are we going to have home prices decline? We're not seeing it right now. We're still seeing double-digit year-over-year gains in home prices, 15% nearly, just this last month. We're likely going to have a slowdown in home sales, though. So for realtors out there, it's going to be different. It's going to be different the last 2 years, but it's probably more for the pre-pandemic pace. So going back to that historic norm that we had been on, last 2 years have been crazy. They have been a frenzied activity. It's been overheated. We've seen a lot of demand for people changing where they want to live because of remote work and all these other trends. And so that was a big boom outside. Going to
I heard it.
There's just construction activity outside the street here. But I think that this is better, honestly, for the real estate market, because that frenzied pace is really unhealthy and it was pushing up prices really quickly. But prices seem to be holding on. There are wealthier consumers out there who are saying, wait, I don't have to compete against 12 neighbors who also want to buy this house. Maybe my offer actually does get accepted at this higher rate. So because of affordability, though, that's hard for consumers. So
Well, and just even on that note, so we've had a report that came out here in Atlanta that showed from the institutional buyers that have come into our area. Now,
Mhm.
I know this is not just an Atlanta issue or
Mhm.
Georgia issue. Is this an issue that is really stretched out across America?
So I will hesitate though and say, no, it's not just an Atlanta issue, but you really do have a lot of institutional investors in your area and higher than we do see in other parts of the country. So you're feeling it more. We do see the state of Texas, I think, is near the top, if not the top state, but that's spread over across the state. Atlanta has a lot of institutional investors, and I think we sent you the data on a county level, and it's very high. So it's absolutely something that is very hard for a first-time home buyer to compete against that institutional investor who's going to pay all cash for that home when someone is coming in with an FHA loan. That's a hard sell to that seller.
Yeah, I think Georgia Tech reported that it's nearly, I think, 48% of the homes that just sold went all to institutional buyers. So when we look at first time home buyers, or even with those institutional buyers, they only have one or two agents that really represent them.
Mm-hmm.
So where, like you said, we may not necessarily be hitting a recession, but for many of us,
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's individualized, or for
Absolutely.
certain communities, you're feeling those pressures a lot differently than someone is maybe in Indiana or
Yes.
Ohio or things like that. So we're
Yep.
finding these segments, these pockets, and some have actually already related for it based on racial demographics,
Mm-hmm.
not so much just on income base, but just racial demographics.
Yep.
And so that type of impact. Like I said, some people may be feeling the recession is here. And when we see that it's not translating from a job perspective, is because the affordability of being able to pay rent. So you
Yep.
might have two jobs available, but for that one person, it's one person. And those two jobs may not even translate to where they'll still be able to pay their mortgage
Right.
or even rent.
Yep.
What type of difference are you seeing in those rental rates?
Yeah, in some areas of the country, they're going up 30, 40%, which that is astronomical, especially when you think also coupled with the rise in gas prices just to fill the tank. My contractor, who I have on speed dial because I have an old house and it needs a lot of work, I saw his Facebook post and he said he can't even fill up his truck before the gas actually maxes out at $150. He has to then have a second transaction to fill up his tank. That's a problem. That's a problem for so many consumers out there. And those in the trades who have to drive around in a truck or a van, I feel for you because that is very tough.
I spent $150 just last week, and I had to fill up this morning, and it was $63 when I bought this truck because I've got an SUV. When I bought it and I paid $30, I was like, what? Oh my God. And I got full tank. And then I was this morning, I was like, $63. What the hell?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then you head to the grocery store and you need to get milk and you need to get meat and stock up for the
I'm
week.
vegan, so it's really
okay.
expensive. Yeah, it's really expensive
Right.
for that
Absolutely.
impact,
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
I know I'm not the only one.
No,
uh,
it's very hard right now. It's very hard for America.
it's tough. Do we see have you heard any other additional things that maybe the White House, or I know you guys just had another Hill visit, I believe before this recent report came. I think I saw something on your social media with our current president that you were just at. Can you tell us?
Yeah, so we did a congressional briefing and we went over a lot of the material actually that we've gone over today, which is wonderful. And we put it into the hands of people on the Hill. So hopefully we can have action on so many of these host of issues. But one of the things that I think, is so important is for consumers today to know that there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. The economy is cyclical. So it's going to be hard, I think, in the short term as we see this. Some of the big impacts, though, hopefully we're starting to see some light. So we know that China was on lockdown for an extended period of time. That's where a lot of things are built. And if we don't have people who can make products and we can ship them to the US, That's an enormous issue. Of course, there's lots of questions here too with the war in Ukraine, and does that stop anytime soon? But that's an impact as well on gas prices. So hopefully we'll have relief, but in the short term, it is difficult.
I am so thankful for your time. You provided additional insight that not only our realtors, but our consumers will be able to take this information from our sites, be able to digest it, and be able to go out and make a difference. And I truly believe that because of the data that you and the way that it's articulated in these reports, I feel confident that anybody who's ready to move this needle for home ownership, to move this needle for progression in the way that our zoning or just, a lot of challenges that we have, the way that these reports are articulated, I think will help propel them to be able to be a change maker in their community. And we can't do it without you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. This has been such an incredible conversation. I really did love starting the day this way. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. And I want to just say to everyone that's out there, be encouraged. The time, it may be a little tough now, but it's going to get better. And you just heard it here from the fabulous Jessica Lautz with NAR, the National Association of Realtors. Yay. And so be encouraged that it's only going to be a short time, hopefully, but it's going to change around. So thank you for joining in, and we'll see you next time on Let's Talk About It.